where on top of the minaret that Al-Ashraf Qaitbay, the illustrious Sultan of Egypt and of neighboring lands, attached to the mosque, madrasa and tomb he built in 1473. This is the heart of the so-called City of the Dead, the Muslim cemeteries that stretch from south to north for more than 8 kilometers between the east side of the city along the Nile and the cliffs of the desert plateau. From here to the citadel, it's about 2 kilometers, while the necropolis continues far beyond. When Salah ad-Din started building the mighty citadel of Cairo in 1176, these cemeteries were already a few hundred years old. Sultan Qaitbay's magnificent mosque, madrasa and dome tomb were at the center of a huge complex of various buildings. Among its many structures is a large tenement house that included no less than 33 duplex apartments. There were many other residential buildings within the complex. Let's begin with a visit to the mosque and mausoleum. The harmony of the interior is perfect. It doesn't overwhelm, yet its noble proportions are quite monumental. There is remarkable attention to detail, and the various materials and techniques combine into a harmonious whole. Like many Mamluk mosques in Cairo, it was endowed as a madrasa, a theological school. In the center, there's a square-covered courtyard faced by 4 liwans, open-fronted halls marked by arches. Here, the side liwans are little more than recesses. The largest liwan contains the mihrab, a niche indicating the direction of Mecca and the minbar, a wooden pulpit for Friday sermons, a masterpiece of medieval woodwork sadly defaced in a recent theft. In the mausoleum, one is equally impressed by its soaring stone dome, its elaborate prayer niche, and exquisite inscription bands. Once, oil burnt in lamps hanging from the painted octagonal frame. The glass lamps have been replaced with modern replicas, while the original Mamluk ones are masterpieces that are prized by the world's leading museums. The art of glass blowing is still alive in Cairo's cemetery. Let's stop for a moment on our way out. Mamluk mosques usually have light and ventilation shafts over entrance corridors, and the draft of air always cools the place even on hot days. This is why the niche for keeping earthenware jars with drinking water was always placed in this area. Once we're outside, a look at the mosque can tell a few things about Mamluk architecture. First, each element of the facade is regular and formally designed, but these elements are put together in an imaginative, freehand and asymmetrical way. For instance, the imposing entrance portal is not placed in the middle of the facade, nor does it lead directly to the prayer hall. Second, there's no real distinction between the structural and the ornamental forms. The exquisite decoration is carved in load-bearing masonry. This gives the building an organic feel. The airy structure in the corner is a 2-part combination. The bottom part is for the charitable distribution of free drinking water raised from a huge underground cistern. The space above is for a free Quranic school for children. There were several hundred such structures in medieval Cairo. There were also charities offering water to animals, like this drinking trough bearing the name of Qaitbay. The Sultan erected no less than 3 such buildings in Cairo. Before we move to other Qaitbay buildings, let us pay a short visit to a glass-blowing workshop next door. In a centuries-old technique, the master glass blowers at the cemetery turn recycled glass into imaginative forms, often similar to those found in Roman period Egypt. The domed building, now known as the tomb of El-Gulshani, at the end of the attractive city square, is a mausoleum that Qaitbay built before he became sultan and could afford a grander one. It is simpler than the later building, but quite exquisite nevertheless. Qaitbay used this tomb to bury his prematurely deceased children. The huge building on the side of the square is the Sultan's Maq'ad, a reception hall overlooking a courtyard. The main hall is on the upper floor, with a row of storerooms below. Like all maq'ads, it had its own staircase so guests could enter it directly. After conservation, the Maq'ad and the tomb of Al-Gulshani serve as a neighborhood cultural hub hosting various events. Let us now move to the area behind the Maq'ad and the mausoleum of Al-Gulshani. This huge lot, until recently filled with garbage and rubble from collapsed buildings, was the residential and service area of the Sultan's complex. It included a hall with a sumptuously decorated wooden ceiling and service facilities. The ruined structures are now being excavated and conserved. When Qaitbay started building here, there were earlier tombs in the area. One with a ribbed brick dome was erected in about 1405 for an emir called Ibn Ghurab, or son of a crow. Another mausoleum is a very unusual building. It was built in the mid-14th century for a dignitary with the tongue-twisting name Mankalibugha al-Fakhri. Almost all monumental tombs in medieval Cairo were covered with domes, but this was a hall, originally covered with a pointed barrel vault, opening onto a courtyard with two similar smaller halls to the sides. Its simple forms are in stark contrast with the splendor of Qaitbay's mausoleum. We will venture outside the Sultan Qaitbay's complex now through a gateway next to the Maq'ad. Notice how a gateway into a house or palace or mosque in Mamluk Cairo was never straight through, but always dog-legged to preserve the privacy of the interiors. We have come to the nearby mausoleum, which is the oldest in this part of the cemetery, dating from 1334. It was built for Emir Tash Timur, whose life story full of drama and suspense ended in violent death. His tomb is a good example of the early Mamluk style. The plain ribbed brick dome sits on a simple base, but the design and craftsmanship of the stone tomb chamber are of outstanding quality. The so-called city of the dead was always also meant to accommodate the living, and it's still home for many people. They go about their everyday business, they raise children, and those who have been to Mecca proudly display pictures of their pilgrimage on their walls. Dwelling here often means literally living in the shadow of a magnificent past. A comparison of Sultan Qaitbay's architectural ensemble with that of Tash Timur's tomb shows how far Mamluk architecture progressed in the 140 years between them. We will now make a short walk to the mausoleum known as the Qubbat Effendina, or the Dome of our Ruler, to see how the Mamluk legacy found a meaningful continuation. In passing, we may take a quick look at the work of the coppersmith master Magdi Zaki. He carves freehand intricate decoration on brass vessels exactly as his predecessors did in Sultan Qaitbay's times. Many astonishing handcrafted objects are made in this neighborhood, often with traditional techniques and simple tools. A short walk from Sultan Qaitbay's complex brings us to the mausoleum of another ruler of Egypt more than 400 years later. When Khedive Tawfiq died in 1892, his son Abbas Helmi was only 18 years old. The young monarch and his mother honored their late father and husband with a fitting mausoleum, adjacent to the tombs of the illustrious medieval sultans of Egypt, and in a style directly borrowing from a Mamluk architecture unique to Cairo. The building also carried a political message. Egypt at the time was under de facto foreign rule. Egyptian nationalism was on the rise, and the young Khedive secretly supported it. The style of the mausoleum was thus a declaration of Egyptian national identity. The mausoleum is an outstanding example of the Neo-Mamluk style. Its architectural and decorative elements are taken directly from medieval Cairo, superimposed here over a building arrangement typical of the late 19th century. Under the ornate dome, the exquisite marble cenotaph commemorates Princess Pembe Kadin, who in 1112 gave birth to the future ruler of Egypt, Abbas Helmi I, the great-grandfather of Khedive Abbas Helmi II, who built the mausoleum. The masterful piece of artistic woodwork next to it is the cenotaph of Khedive Tawfiq. Other members of the royal family are also buried here. We have ended our visit to the northern area of the Eastern Cemetery. We have seen just a fraction of its treasures, since these tombs and funerary complexes are only a small part of the vast necropolis built over 1,000 years of Egyptian history. This vast cemetery, furthermore, is just one aspect of Cairo's urban architecture legacy.